Hey guys, it's RodimusPrimal. I am back with another video, and today I'll be interviewing the showrunner for the War for Cybertron Trilogy's Kingdom series, and we're going to be talking heavy spoilers for this particular series. And we had a very long interview, and it ended up going so long that I've decided to actually split it into two parts, and this is going to be part one of that, and you're going to see part two very soon. So without further ado, let's sit back, relax, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and let's transform and roll out. Consider supporting the channel on Patreon, becoming a channel member, or purchase some merch on my Spring store today.
So FJ, what's going on? How you been?
I'm okay. When we're recording this, the show's not out yet, so I'm stressed out. But what people don't see is the hour and a half you and I sort of chat where you become my Transformers therapist, in which I get to, tell you all my anxiety of fans liking and hating things and all that stuff. So you're going to have to start charging by the hour.
Well, at least I can monetize on the video, right? So
there you go. That's true. That's true.
Yeah. But also, at the same time, you get to really dive into the further stuff of Transformers. And last time we talked, I had not seen Earthrise yet, and so I didn't know how that series was going to play out. But now I've seen both, so we can talk quite a bit about it. And I've told you before already, I didn't care for Earthrise as a whole. And it just the pacing, some of the things within it, and some of Optimus's lines and stuff. But Kingdom, I'll tell you straight up, I thought it was awesome. I like the ending. I think it opens the door for so much more as a whole. But anyhow, some of the cool stuff that ends up happening in Kingdom, Galvatron. Like, you want to talk about Galvatron and Nemesis? Let's.
That was weirdly, when we start these shows, Hasbro sort of tells us in advance, like, these are the characters for the next 3 years for each line. And when they showed us Kingdom, this is like in 2018, they're like, listen, Galvatron's going to be in Kingdom. And my first thought was, wait a minute, you already have the Beast Wars characters. Like, why the hell is Galvatron in there? And they were like, we don't know, it's just time for a Galvatron figure. And, that's the joy of, their jobs at Hasbro, is they don't have to worry as much as we do. It's on me to, and the writers to sort of figure out how the hell that all works. So we knew Galvatron was going to be in it, and we wanted to make it meaningful because he's so important, especially in that '86 movie, and and sort of it comes in and out after, in the post sort of movie G1 and all that shit. And the one thing we knew early on was we were going to have Megatron meet Galvatron. That was like super important, since we haven't really talked about Earthrise.
Right.
We sort of knew, we played with a bunch of ideas like Galvatron killing Megatron and taking over and all this stuff. Like, it didn't all click, but we knew, there were two things that early on we knew Galvatron was going to be in it. We knew the Beast Wars characters were going to be in it. And then we sort of figured out, like, is there a way to connect all that? That was the first thing. And then Nemesis sort of came up early, of like, it'd be cool to have him in the Dead Universe. We always knew we were going to do a Dead Universe episode. And like really early on, like George Christic and I knew Dead Universe. And I think Hasbro sort of mentioned it, but it was also, we knew the Dead Universe was going to be a conduit to get us to Earth.
Okay.
For Beast Wars, because even though we've gone and said, hey, this is a prequel to G1 and all that stuff, this is not G1 simply by the nature of Beast Wars characters are going to be introduced. And I told Hasbro that, like, you're basically changing everything by doing that. And they were okay with that. So that was where the multiverse, it's a buzzword now, but 3 years ago we were talking about a Transformers multiverse because the Beast Wars characters were going to be introduced. And what we came to realize as we got into Earthrise with that Dead Universe episode was we could seed Kingdom in this. We could seed where we wanted to take the show. And it's sort of presented as a very clean sort of thing of Galvatron and Nemesis would represent in this War for Cybertron continuity, meaning they were the direct result of their war. And subsequently, we tied in Beast Wars characters with that.
Right.
So there's a little bit of, the beauty of Beast Wars, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, is Beast Wars, the show, the original show, only gave us so much, pretty much nothing, about where they came from.
Right.
Like what that world was. So what we wanted to do with this was Beast Wars characters, Galvatron, Nemesis, Unicron, right? Put those over here a minute. They represent the universe of Cybertron where the Allspark never comes back.
Okay.
Right? Like what happens if the mission failed? So because as of when you meet them, they have not succeeded in the mission. Right? So the twist is you got to get the thing back. So that's why we were able to tie Nemesis and Galvatron and Unicron into the Beast Wars continuity, or at least our iteration of it, right? Our version of it. And that gave, especially Tim and May, the writers, and kudos to Gavin Hignite, who wrote the Dead Universe episode, sort of teed this up. We knew at that point what we wanted to do, and also the Golden Disc and all those things. So we didn't know until we did the Dead Universe episode, Nemesis was going to have a bigger role, or he was going to come back.
Okay.
The original idea was just going to be Galvatron. But then, you find out these things from Hasbro, like, hey, we're doing this giant Unicron. And it's like, oh, really? Do you have the designs for that? And they were like, yeah, you can have them. And we're like, okay, we're going to put, Unicron. And originally, again, it was just going to be a tease, and then we could make him mean something more in Kingdom.
Okay.
So those pieces all sort of came together.
How it all comes together. I will say how it does come together. That's actually one of the coolest elements, was how it all came to piece together. And then introducing the Beast Wars characters. Now you knew the Beast Wars characters before you even started Siege.
Yeah. It was always, that was the big thing. Like whatever was 2018, they were like, listen, the third, we're going to do this thing called War for Cybertron. And it's going to be, and again, we have to figure out the story of these things, but they give us sort of the parameters of the sandbox, which is Siege is this war, dark war thing, and Prime's going to throw the Allspark into the space bridge, because they'd already done that in Cyberverse. They wanted that aligned continuity, they call it.
Okay.
And then Earthrise, they were going to go to space and meet Quintessons, and actually, we might have come up with the Quintesson thing, but they were going to go to space, and it was going to be like Star Trek. And the third one is Beast Wars. And we were like, wait, what? Is the third one is going to be the Beast Wars characters? And I said, how the hell do you do that? And well, they had their ideas, we had our ideas, and we sort of met in the middle of how to do that. And even I'm surprised. And again, kudos to May and Tim, the writers, because they really did the heavy lifting. They made it super clean in Kingdom. You've seen it, like, the explanation is simple, the explanation is clean, and it makes sense. And because what we didn't want to do, I told you this before we were on air, is I didn't want to do some amnesia thing that they did this and then it didn't really happen, or we forgot about it because we went back into, no. And Hasbro, to their credit, was like, no, you can keep the Beast Wars characters with the Autobots and G1 characters and Decepticons and start a whole different thing. And we were like, oh, okay. Like, we had the permission to do that, but it was on us to make it clean. And again, when I first met Tim for Earthrise, he came in with a Galvatron, like a vintage Galvatron toy. Like, okay. He was like, Galvatron, like, we're going to do something cool with Galvatron. And like, he had great energy and wanted to do different things and push it into different directions. And it was great. And coming out of Siege, which was very traditional Autobots, Decepticons, and you had Brandon and Gavin, so helped us bridge that into Earthrise, because they're all really talented. They all brought something specific. Brandon had all these great ideas of, like, we're building the mercenary faction, and the Omega is going to pop out of this, and all. Those were the things we collaborated on. Gavin came in and sort of, because he knew Cyberverse and was diehard, he could do those deep cut Easter eggs and all that stuff, but also have Siege make sense and lead it into Earthrise and sort of bring us into that. you know, and it was always knew Gavin was going to do the Dead Universe episode. And then Tim came in, it was so much fun and brought an energy to it. But I had met May before Siege, and when I was meeting different writers for this, who was going to be for, and May came in, and the first thing she said to me was, "Are you doing anything with Beast Wars?" And I couldn't tell her.
Yeah.
She wasn't under an NDA yet and all this shit. I couldn't be like, "Listen, third one's going to be Beast Wars." She said, "Well, are there Beast Wars?" They're my favorite thing ever. I know it inside and out. I said, "I'm going to answer that question in 6 months if you're still available." And she goes, "I'll make myself available." And then we got into, months later, we got into Earthrise, and I called her and I said, I said, "Bring her in. She's on the third one." And she came in. I said, "The third one's called Kingdom." And she went, like her head exploded.
Wow.
You should interview her at some point. And so she sort of now had, I don't know remember how far we were along, if I could show them animatics, but they had the scripts,
Okay.
And Tim had been involved with Earthrise. I always wanted, when I was bringing new writers in, I always wanted a writer from the previous season to sort of have the continuity. And that way the new person could jump in, like Gavin with Tim, and then May comes in and then Tim guides her.
Was Gavin on Kingdom as well, or he was just on?
No, because Gavin went off to do the other show I was telling you about, which I can't say publicly. I had hired Gavin for that. So he went to do another show for me and Matt while May and Tim did this one. So it was good. So May came in and wrote the first episode of Kingdom. They came in and they were like kids in a candy store, because the beauty of, at this point, was we had 2 seasons where we knew the story. We didn't quite know, we knew that Beast Wars characters were coming in and we had to resolve all these things. So I give them a lot of props for successfully concluding the trilogy,
right,
as a whole thing, like where it all makes sense as a thing, but but accepting and exceeding on the challenge of integrating Beast Wars characters into this story.
Yeah.
In a way that satisfies Beast Wars fans and G1 fans.
The way the Beast Wars characters in the original series was done out of obviously respect for the original, for G1, the way that was done. Bringing the Beast Wars characters this time, now they're from a different future, so they're from a different timeline, so to speak. And so these Maximals and Predacons behave and act very differently than some of us are expecting. When even though you had folks who were working on it that really loved Beast Wars, how was it challenging trying to incorporate those characters differently, or was it more so trying to tell the overall narrative the way that you needed? It's kind of a hard question, but
I get the question, because what's weird sort of watching Kingdom is how, like I said, how smooth and clean it is, when we really, especially early on, had sort of no idea how we were going to pull it off.
Right.
We knew the beats, like we knew, like, hey, we want to do the Dinobot thing. Like we want to sort of do that homage and all that, even though it was very similar to Jetfire. It was just too good not to do it. Like you could sit there, if somebody doesn't know these characters, to sit there go, why'd you do that again? Like a bad guy becoming a good guy. It's like, well, it's this classic thing, right? It's this thing, but also serve the story. Like I love that he gets the Matrix back for Prime and all that.
Yep.
Like it's not a needless death. And because Tim and May in particular inherently knew Beast Wars, and they knew how to weave it into the War for Cybertron storyline, where those moments count in terms of respecting the original show.
Yeah.
Because in the end, this is a multiverse. Like I can't replicate G1. There's no point retelling G1. And in this case, you can't necessarily retell Beast Wars, but you can do variations of these things as homages. And again, the reference point was always the Star Trek 2009, which is, hey, it's these characters, and basically saying, hey, if you watch Star Trek all these years, all that happened, but this thing happens and it's a twist, and now you have new possibilities. That was the approach with War for Cybertron. It's a prequel to G1 that takes a curveball. You know what I mean? Like, and that's how the Beast Wars characters end up in it. And that's how Galvatron and Nemesis end up in it. And, we sort of reference a multiverse. That was always a plan. And but it was always, these things were always meant as a love letter to the things that came before it.
Yeah, and that's very much. I would say the original Beast Wars did that with Generation 1, and I think the way that Kingdom specifically ends up homaging and at the same time respecting. I mean, again, I say this out of telling you straight that I didn't care for Earthrise, even though there were things that I liked in Earthrise. Like I said, like I liked Galvatron meeting Megatron. I felt it was very Marvel UK. I thought it was kind of creepy that a Quintesson cut his own face off. like why would a Quintesson do that?
Him on someday, you can blame him for that.
Okay, because I mean it was creepy and weird, but I wanted an explanation as to why he was doing it. But it was just
Well, you know what? I can tell you a little bit about that. It's one of those things where it's like, well, Joe, if I had 10 episodes, the idea of Decius was originally, he was the guy who, he wanted these Transformers as redemption to get back into Quintesson society, right? Some of it's there, some of it's not. But I'll give you sort of the backstory we created for him. Was he claims he's the guy who created the transformation cog, right? Like not Cog, the character, but he's the guy who created the bit that allowed them to transform so they can, which eventually subsequently leads to their rebellion, right?
Okay.
So in our mind, he was sort of excommunicated, like, hey, by the rest of
the Quintessons. Okay. All right.
And if you capture these guys, that's why he does in my mind, when sort of Double Dealer finds these guys and calls this guy particularly, it's because that guy, Decius, wants the Transformers as his ticket back in. Like, I caught them. Here they are. And then you run into the problems of, by the way, of who really created the Transformers. Was the Quintessons or was the Allspark, right? And so we said, we'll just play into it. We'll make it vague. It's a debate. Prime sitting there, we were created by the Allspark. And he's like, Allspark. Like, don't give me, like, we created you. So there's a story like that to be had. That's why he has those prototype soldiers. Because eventually he's, building his army. And that's why he's so pissed when he comes back later.
Okay.
Like,
so that makes a lot of sense. That's something we can go further in this interview, is that one of the limitations on the show was that they were 6-episode seasons. And, a lot of people have made like, they couldn't get us more episodes. Was that a limitation for you that you had to overcome, that you wanted more, 10-episode seasons? Or
yeah, I mean, look, I fought for more very, very early on, but the dilemma becomes this: is Netflix is only going to pay a certain budget amount, right?
Okay. Which
is a healthy budget. So there's a couple of factors with this, and I'm sure we'll get into some of this later with some of the other topics. But I have a budget of this, and it's a good budget, right? I want it to look good, okay? But in a thing called War for Cybertron, I need a lot of characters. It can't be Logan. It's got to be X-Men. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
If I do something called War for Cybertron and there's no armies, what's the point of it, right?
Right.
And the other thing is Hasbro, and again, this isn't a knock, this is just the reality of it, is they do these toy lines for some reason as trilogies. Don't ask me why, right? So there's Siege, there's Earthrise, and Kingdom. That's presented to me as a 3 thing. And when I go and sell it to Netflix, I say there's 3 chapters. Well, you're only getting 18 episodes, right? So, and by the way, which is more than a lot of other shows get. They're not guaranteed this. Like the other show I'm doing for Netflix, I don't have any guarantee beyond 6, right? So you do have the luxury of knowing I can tell these 3 things or the 3 chapters. Now, the problem is I can't shortchange Kingdom. I could have done 10 Siege, right, et cetera. But also for Netflix, 6, 6, and 6 at that point made sense for their network.
Okay.
I can't argue that, right? So it's on me and the team, from everybody from the writers to the animators to everybody, to somehow to make this all make sense in 6-episode chunks. I'm still convinced you don't like Earthrise because it's less a mini movie than the other 2. Whereas Siege is just one long movie, Kingdom's one long movie. The difference with Earthrise was we came up with the idea of Decius, came up with the idea of Scorponok, we came up with the idea of Skylynx, and the Dead Universe. Like that was like Dead Universe was like super important from the beginning.
Yeah.
We didn't realize how important it was going to be in terms of building into the thing, but we had this idea of the dead, going into the dead universe as sort of the portal, the way to get to Earth, right? Nebulon Space Station, that was something George and I came up with really early on. Later it was developed with a space bridge, with a space station stuck. But the point being is, it's our job to tell those stories in the 6 episodes. Some could argue it's not enough. Some argue it's too much. And as you'll see, I don't make any excuses for anything we do. I'm proud of everything we've done.
Right.
And I'd rather have more than less. I'd rather be chock full of characters than anemic and you didn't get to see Spinister, or you didn't get to see, a minor character, etc. I could have made less Autobots and less Decepticons, but Astro Train is cool. You know what I mean? Like, you want to put those characters in there. So we also knew Siege was going to be the big war, so you needed to see a bunch of characters.
Right.
Earthrise, we were going to space, so we could dial it down in terms of we don't introduce as many characters in it, right? Also because we knew I wanted all those Beast Wars characters to show up in the 3rd season.
Right.
And if I didn't have that, there was no point. There's no point of introducing just 1 or 2 Beast Wars characters. If you know what I mean? Like, so
yeah.
There was always a plan, and there was a list. Matt Murray would know this better than I do, the supervising producer. We had like charts from Hasbro, like, you can kill these characters. These characters had to go on the Ark and had to survive. We sort of had parameters where we knew we're going to kill Cog, right? We're going to kill him, and it's fine. Was the other thing I really wanted to do was have the deaths mean something, like Alita had to mean something for the character. Like, Alita's sort of the payoff for Prime, because I know that's your other big issue is Prime's character, was the idea of Alita's death is what really sort of sets him on his way as the hero, but we can get into that later. But yeah, 6 episodes. Decius, I could have done a 2-parter of Decius, but the problem becomes, what do you, what is it telling for the overall story? It was sort of, I had to get them to Earth.
In a way, like Earthrise was almost the like a 6-part exposition for Kingdom.
Yeah, it's sort of like we were originally never going back to Alita and company.
Mm-hmm.
The original idea was you would pick up in Kingdom when they finally got back. She's dead. You don't know how, etc. But Alita was so cool.
Yeah.
In Siege, right? She was the only.
I liked her story in Earthrise, but
yeah, and that's the thing. That was the thing with Tim and Gavin, was we realized, hey, these characters are interesting. Jetfire made this turn. Let's see what that leads to. And we sort of allude to, like, I don't remember my chronology on everything's figured out, but when you look at the end of Siege and the sun rises coming up and you have Alita and the gang and Jetfire and all that stuff, our original misdirect for fun was the show was going to be about these guys and not Prime. Prime's dead. They think Prime's dead. And then you see the arc and something's approaching in the last shot of Siege. That was I might have told you this already. That was originally supposed to be a post-credit scene.
Okay.
Right. So the show was originally supposed to end. The team is Alita and company, and they're going to carry on the fight. Right. So 2 things happened with this. Is I didn't want anybody to think like Prime's really dead, and no one was going to believe it anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So we did that as a post-credit thing, but Netflix doesn't do post-credit scenes. So it's like on the originals, because it's always click over the credits. So we do that long gap, and then you hear the beeping in the ship. We just tacked it on, right?
Okay.
Then 2 things sort of happened when we started to develop Earthrise with Gavin and Tim, which was we could have concentrated just on Prime and company, but then where's Megatron, right? That was another big thing, is like, then you'd lose Megatron for most of the 2nd season. You don't want to do that because Marnoka's great. And we set up all these cool things. And that's how like the Nemesis project came up. Okay. Because I just didn't want him showing up in the Nemesis. And well, what was going on there the whole time? Like, that was no fun. So I sort of wanted to see Alita versus Megatron. So we expanded Earthrise. Mm-hmm. And again, if we had 10 episodes, it becomes a different thing.
I think that's probably what it is. I think that like Siege and Earthrise, if they had more episodes to be able to tell those stories that you wanted to tell within it, it probably would have, like, those missing elements is probably my biggest beef. And like you said, it was a mini movie with Earthrise. I mean, it wasn't a mini movie with Earthrise.
I'd rather you not be happy with what's not there versus what's there, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. You know,
Yeah.
meaning I'll take the criticism of, yeah, this is fun. I just wish you had 10 episodes to tell all this, because I get it. I'm the same way,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm saying, yeah, I would love to have an episode just of DC's backstory. I would love to have more with Scrapface and the little rebellion. You know, the beauty of Earthrise is Elite is the one who figures out how to work with the Decepticons.
Yeah.
He rescues these guys and all that stuff, and I love all that stuff. Like, that's some of my favorite stuff in the series, because that evolved as we kept going. Because Lindsay's awesome, right?
Yeah.
Lindsay's just, you've had her on, right? She's so good. I watched the episode you did with her. She's so good, right? And you know, and then killing her off and all that stuff. You know, now that you've seen Kingdom, you see why.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. Like Kingdom, the setup in Earth, like the setup that Earthrise did for the setup that Kingdom, I mean that Earthrise did for Kingdom, the Kingdom was the payoff, you know. And it's like I really hated this chapter, but the third chapter was the payoff, you know. And I enjoyed the entirety of it, from the Beast Wars characters to the characters' growth. I mean, Mirage actually doing the disappearing act, like I thought it was like, yes, finally, right? Because he didn't actually do that in Siege, because he did the creating the Mirage, you know. Although I wish that it was Hound making holograms, but that was like one of his abilities in
can't please everybody.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm messing with you, because certain characters.
But you can't have Kingdom without Earthrise, right? So
Right.
The thing is, I'd love to think of it. I don't know why Netflix puts it on as 3 different things. To me, it's just one giant journey, right?
Yeah.
So it's your middle chapter. The middle chapter is always tricky. And I get it. I mean, but look, there are things I love, like Scorponok and what that alludes to in the Nebulon station. Who the hell's that guy? And all that
Right.
stuff. And we got to do more mercenaries and you know, and I think Decius, when he comes back at the end, is really frightening and cool. And
Controlling double dealer. I thought that was an interesting twist.
Yeah, I don't remember how we came up with that, but it was like a really cool thing. I'm sure Gavin or Tim came up with that, because that's a Tim episode. It was just a cool way of bringing Decius back and paying him off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we leave it sort of unresolved in the second episode, where he sort of just disappears into the darkness. And we wanted to do something different with the Quintessons that made him, you know, real crazy. You know, like when I talk about it, the more, you know, I'm very fond of Earthrise, because I feel like we, you know, I don't want to say we were handcuffed on Siege, but like we knew we had to do the war, and we knew we had to get the Allspark into the bridge and all that stuff. Earthrise, we had much more of a blank slate to sort of build that allowed us.
I think what probably a lot of people were criticizing the fact that they didn't actually land, like it's supposed to be called Earthrise, and it's like, no, Earthrise is you approaching the Earth. That's what Earthrise is, like the actual term. People were saying that, but like, and also because the toy line itself was all about the Earth modes, but the story itself. I would say that if the overall, like the biggest problem with Earthrise as a whole is that you had the Galactic Odyssey, so to speak, that you were going all these places.
So you'd prefer that title. You'd prefer the Galactic Odyssey title.
That would be a better title, yeah. But I think that if they went to different planets, they had more room to go to other planets throughout Earthrise. It may have been a little bit more. People would have felt like it was an adventure that they went on with Earthrise. Whereas like you had to get from the point of Siege to the point of Kingdom, and Earthrise was the setup for it. Yeah,
that's what it is. And it's sort of, I mean, the tricky thing becomes there's a race against time for the Allspark, right? So you always have that sort of hanging over everything. And one thing I'm really proud of that developed is going back to Cybertron and Earthrise. Like that stuff is just all great. Like the Nemesis project and the bit where Megatron goes to the facility and meets the citizens and all that stuff. Like I love all that stuff. The talking to which was the head, the Magnus head, which alas poor Yorick from Shakespeare. That was our whole thing. That was like our Shakespearean moment. But yeah, to your point, it was, we knew where that journey had to take us.
Yeah.
And so we could only deviate so far in terms for the Optimus plot in particular, the space stuff, or we then take away from the race to get the Allspark, right? So it becomes like an episode of Star Trek, and they go to a planet, meet these people, etc. So that's why we introduced the mercenaries super early. Is, you know, we got to get out of here. We got to get away from and this guy Decius and all this crazy stuff, and you know, even the stuff at Nebulon. The idea is like that space bridge is going to get us to where we need to go. Like they're still tracking Earth. Like, yeah, I'd be curious for people to go back and rewatch the whole thing together as one giant 18 episode thing. I think it connects more than people realize. There's not a lot of fat on it, meaning we didn't have a lot of time because of the
limitations. Well, you had a limit of 18 episodes, and that was probably where your limits lie.
But the thing is, to your point about the Earth modes, is look, we went into. I'm going to give up like a production thing. Is we knew that we tried creatively to figure out a way to get them into the Earth modes, but it takes away from the story. Like it makes no sense. Yeah. Right. Like when you tell that story, it's like. Then you're into the commercial for toys territory, right? We did do something that got cut, which I'm going to give up. I think I've talked about this I've done a bunch of interviews for this that aren't out yet, so forgive me if this is repetitive. Hasbro really wanted the Earth modes, but I couldn't figure out a way to do it, right? So one thing we did, and then we had to cut it, but some of it's still in the show. This is a little Easter egg thing. When they crash on Earth, and we're in Kingdom now, and Prime's injured when he first fights Primal, and then he passes out. Right. The original idea was that the Maximals would have technology that could save Primal. And the idea was that they inadvertently upgrade him to the Earth mode. So we were going to have an Earth mode Optimus. Okay. So actually, if you look really close in the medical bay or wherever it is, you'll actually see a video screen somewhere, or maybe not even, maybe on the bridge, because of what's going on with Teletran, also being through the dead universe, is actually, you'll see a bit where it comes up super quick, 1984. Okay. And there are things that reference G1, all this crazy stuff, and it goes by super quick. You can't, even if you try to isolate it, you can't find it. But the original idea was you were going to upgrade him, and then when he jumped into battle later, I think RC said to him, like, oh, look at you, new look. And what we realized was it felt really forced. Okay. And it didn't make sense. So I had to make a call pretty deep into the production, because after that point you were going to see him. I think we even had the model built of Prime in Earth mode. But then again, you'd have to sit there and explain it. Right? Well, we accidentally upgraded you to your future self. But then the problem becomes if you meet Nemesis and he's not in that mode, right? Yeah. Like there's like domino effects to these things that
you wanted to make sure it stayed good to the story. That's
much as I wanted to stay, especially in Siege, stay super loyal to the toys, like too loyal to the toys to a degree, some would say, right? By the time I got to Kingdom, it was, I got to wrap this story up. I got to tell the story. Like these writers, like if I'm sitting there telling these guys like, hey, figure out an Earth mode, and we did in the script, but then you realize the episode is getting too long. The episode is this, etc. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah. So now moving on to Kingdom with the Beast Wars characters, introducing the Autobots and the Maximals for the first time and having them at first be kind of adversarial against each other is very different than kind of what some would expect, because the Maximals are supposed to be the descendants of the Autobots. So how did that come about, actually having them fight instead of kind of like saying, we're just from your future and just call it at that?
There's a couple of things with that, which was the one thing, we referenced a lot, even before we had gotten to the scripts, were the old Marvel team-up comics, where heroes would meet, they'd fight, realize, hey, we're both on the good side and let's team up, right? The dream match. Right. And subsequently, in our development, when we realized Nemesis was going to be a bigger part of it, and be sort of, he and Galvatron are sort of the villains of the future, right? Even in a world of Maximals and Predacons, right? That their immediate reaction to seeing Optimus in any way, shape, or form is horror at first. Okay. Like I think even, I don't know who it is, if it's Cheetor or somebody says to Primal, he's not Nemesis yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, like, so the idea is like the initial knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, but also we know what you become. That's why it even says like Prime eventually figures out, because Prime is smart. You think Prime's an idiot, but actually when he sees Nemesis later, he puts it all together. Like, that's my future self. No one told him that.
Yeah.
Right? But they call him Nemesis. He's like, do you mean the ship? And it gets cut off. Like, Prime pieces that all together. But the idea was the fun of, let's see them all in beast mode first.
Okay.
Right? Like, that would be the fun thing, is like, they crash land. You don't want to see them in bot mode first. That's no fun. Let's see them in the beast modes, because even our heroes, the Autobots, wouldn't know what the hell that is.
Right.
Right? So when they transform, it's like, whoa, they transform like us. You know, B says that. They're just like us. It's like, no, we do this other thing. But, and then the twist was, with Beast Wars Megatron, is he was proven right. He stole this golden disc for his mentor, for his hero. He names himself after this guy. And subsequently, which we learn later, is Beast Wars Megatron has his own mission, which is, I'm going to keep this guy from becoming Galvatron because I believe in the Decepticon cause.
Okay.
I believe in what my ancestor did. And so when he meets him, you know, and you have that whole flashback with the golden disc, he's determined, you know, and he says, I only heard some of the disc. I only heard some of what this is. But he knows, and he's proven right, if this happens, I have the golden disc, I will find this guy. And this will help me conquer, etc. He's my hero.
Yeah.
You know, it's hero worship. They you know, that's the thing. It's like, he's a super evil dude, Beast Wars Megatron. But he's named Megatron after this guy.
Yep.
You're meeting your idol. You're meeting your inspiration. You're meeting your hero. And you have the opportunity to, save him.
He literally fanboys. He literally fanboys.
That's what it is. And to a degree, when you look at the feud with Dinobot, is like, even Dinobot at a certain sense, well, like, you know, like, this is really happening. You know, Beast Wars allowed certain plot, you know, because they never finished it or never went deeper, it gave us opportunity to fill in some of those blanks.
Right.
Of who these guys were and what they were doing. But also, you have to look at it from the other end, which is, retroactively, how are you fitting Beast Wars, that conflict, and those characters into War for Cybertron, how it applies to the Autobots and Decepticons? And I just didn't want it to be another, hey, these other two guys are fighting over here. No, they have to mean something. With, you know, I told you this another time, but in our sort of backstory that we created internally for this, is Beast Wars characters, Maximals and Predacons, are the future where the Allspark never comes back. They say that in the show.
Right.
So the idea is, when you see Cybertron in episode 6, it's dead.
Yep.
The idea is like any planet evolution, like there were dinosaurs, then there were humans, right? Now there were Autobots and Decepticons. Somehow, it's not my problem to figure out the evolution of Cybertron, billions of years, whatever it is, after War for Cybertron, the Autobots and the Maximals and the Predacons emerge, and their own society forms, and it's built out of the ruins of Cybertron.
Right.
And you would imagine Beast Wars Megatron did his homework on his, you know, Megatron, only to find out Galvatron, this evil thing that's plaguing the planet with his partner Nemesis, is this guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so that we invented that story, and Unicron is the big part of it. Unicron's still trying to destroy everybody.
I like how you made this Unicron a universal singularity.
Yeah.
That he is in all, you said he was in all universes. So
that's my intention.
Or, he was in one universe at a time, but yeah.
Yeah, the idea is like, if you had a Transformers multiverse, there's just one Unicron, he goes everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So we would have heralds in different, you know, again, that's not my thing. Somebody's going to figure out in comics or shows in the future, all that stuff. But the idea is, Unicron's heralds in the War for Cybertron universe are Nemesis and Galvatron. They hate him, obviously, and they realize, hey, the Matrix isn't strong enough. We want the Allspark.
Okay.
So if they get the Allspark, that's the whole argument with Galvatron and Nemesis. I'm sorry, Galvatron and Megatron, which is, I'm your future, dude. You're going to be a slave if you don't help me get the Allspark. Forget Cybertron. And Megatron has that choice to make, which he eventually sides with, you know, everybody else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, The Matrix was the key in the 1986 movie, so it was obviously a little bit different this time around. But
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I don't want to be repetitive. And the other thing is, and I'm just being honest, is Hasbro really wanted the Allspark to be the big thing in this. You know, I didn't come up with the idea of the Allspark gets thrown into space. That was what they were doing in Cyberverse, an aligned continuity. So it's like, okay, like we had plans. Like, what if it's not Prime who throws the thing into the Allspark? What if it's B or somebody? And Hasbro was like, no. Like, we want it. Like, key moments need to match in the multiverse. It's like, okay, that's no problem. It's like, it's done differently, but it's still the same thing.
Gotcha.
So that's why, we had access to all the Cyberverse scripts. So I would go through them and sort of highlight things we were going to do and make sure we didn't contradict it. Another big thing like that is, because I can tell these stories now, is Alpha Trion. So everything you see in Siege with Magnus was originally going to be Alpha Trion.
Okay.
He's the one who tries to broker peace, and he's the one who's got killed, got murdered by Megatron at the, we tweaked it, obviously, it ends up being at the memorial. I'm talking really early development. But then basically in the aligned continuity, Alpha Trion's dead by the time any of this happened.
Calling it aligned continuity, that's what they call the Prime and War for Cybertron games. That's a whole other continuity, but go ahead.
Thank you very much for tuning in for part 1 for this interview. Part 2 will be coming very shortly. If you want, please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to thumbs up this video and subscribe. Check out my other videos as well. And as always, guys, until next time, till all are one.